So one of my viewers, a guy named Josh J, sent me a really interesting question. He said, I've been working on the first draft of a novel where most of the main character's conflicts are resolved except for her trauma, which I've been unable to address. Given your military background, you probably would have keen insight on how a person processes violent loss. Any tips you would give would be most appreciated. Oh, and good luck on your new book release. Well, thank you, Jay, and let's dive into that. It's a great question. Let's look at this in terms of how trauma is processed in real life, and how storytelling can help or hinder this process. There is a very important point to consider when you're thinking about how trauma and recovery is portrayed in storytelling versus how it happens in real life. As I've said before there were therapists and psychiatrists, there were storytellers. The healing arts were once storytelling arts, and for much longer than there have been professionals. Healing and storytelling were one, actually, because the story can stimulate the natural psychological self-healing process that can be interrupted by life's challenges and prevent healing. A well-placed story, with or without ritual enhancement, was once our only tool for healing the soul, although there are some also herbal remedies and things like that. Nevertheless, if you think about psychiatry, the original meaning of the term is healing of the soul. You'll see that this is a continuation of that traditional healing art. Traditional healers have always been storytellers, sometimes in nonverbal rituals, or in the use even of the various herbs that have been used and other types of compounds, in the sense that the herb used had its own story that went with it, and that connected to the user's story. I cover a lot of this in my book, Healing Symbols and Psychotherapy. So check that out if you're interested in that. You can find it on my website. Anyway, what traditional storytelling healers would do would be to put the subject in the context of a grand story that includes myth, parable, legend, folktale, etc., and stimulate what we would call the self-archetype in analytical psychology to promote integration of healing. As the West, however, has become influenced by Cartesian splits in between the mind and body, myth and real life, sacred and profane, storytelling also became separated from healing. And healing became hyper-focused on medications and real-life concerns, so-called real-life concerns, while imaginal stories, folktales, myths, spiritual beliefs, symbolic stories were all relegated to so much children's fanciful nonsense, useless for healing. This is a mistake, of course, and this need not continue. It shouldn't continue. On this channel, I discuss all the myriad ways in which behavioral and neurobiological sciences are coming back to a blended view, which sees the mind, body, spirit, and science as all densely interconnected. What we imagine can influence our bodies, along with our psychosocial context, perceptions, imaginal creations even, and so forth. Symbolic stories like dreams or myths or visions or folktales can all have very real effects on our brains, immune systems, and so forth. Sound like science fiction? It's not anymore. Now, there's limits to all of this, of course, and the devil's in the details, but generally the principle is valid. So anyway, check out my scholarly works for more info. In any case, it's safe to say that many kinds of psychotherapy, and not just Jungian, utilize these principles that the body has its own kinds of consciousness and that our minds are deeply embodied. There are no separations. So now, having said that, the question was about trauma and loss, and the answer in a nutshell is about story. When we are first traumatized or our understanding is shattered, we have paradoxical memory, we have complexes, we have emotional personalities. These are things viewed from multiple different psychological theories and psychotherapy theories. All the while, the psyche is trying to heal by weaving together an image-heavy, symbol-heavy story of what the trauma means. And that's what dreams are about. The psyche is doing this all the time. It's just that trauma really highlights how this works very closely. All the time, the psyche is organizing and ordering our lives, using emotion as the most important guide, using archetypal images and symbols to generate a story of our lives. Now, once I have come to understand the meaning behind a trauma, even if it's only one that I've worked for months to years to forge all on my own, only then will you approach what we call integrated trauma. Active trauma is when you are overwhelmed by the trauma and the efforts that your mind is trying to make sense of what happened to you. Am I still in danger? Am I still going to die soon? Am I still rejected? All of these sorts of things your mind is trying to work together and piece together. And until you get that meaning nailed down, even if it's one that you have to work really hard with a therapist to find, or perhaps one that you find through an inspiring story, through a spiritual practice or belief, any of these techniques, you're still going to be in danger of relapsing or suffering. Until you reach that point, you're still going to be working on it and still vulnerable. You must be caring and compassionate with yourself during this process, but at the same time, not give yourself a pass either. And it's best done with a counselor, a therapist, pastoral guide, what have you. In the end, ultimately, what I'm saying, though, is the biggest problem, I think, with trauma is when a person doesn't understand the meaning of it. That sense of meaninglessness is the most horrendous state that the psyche can be in, because that's what the brain is really literally evolved to do, is to construct meaning of the events that have happened, however that you do that. So once you grasp that meaning, once you say, I'm going to make this the meaning of what has happened to me, then you're still going to be in that chaotic state of grasping at what might this really mean. And one of the greatest tools for building meaning, because you don't want to necessarily try to do this all on your own, building from nothing. It can be done, but it's tough. If, on the other hand, you have stories, inspiring stories, oftentimes religious or mythic or spiritual narratives can be used to help you make an analogy to the story that's been passed down for generations. Say, my story may be like that one. This horrible thing that I went through might be like that, in which case there's hope, there's this meaning, however that's done. And I do believe that that is what is hidden in a lot of folk tales, as well as myths and so forth, and also dreams. So there's your answer. Hopefully you found that interesting. And if you did, click the like button. And until next time, I'll see you later.